Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Shenandoah Valley. My name is Evan Yannick, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees. For anyone who may be new to Unitarian Universalism, ours is a non-judgmental religious home that will accept and support you wherever you may be in your life's journey. Unitarian Universalism is composed of diverse communities operating without a common belief about God, the universe, and death. Instead of a creed, we share a spirit and a vision of radical inclusivity, individual agency, and social justice. This is a safe space to stand out, stand up, and change your mind, particularly during life's transitions. We embrace personal discovery and growth through learning, engagement, and service. Our only doctrine is love. You may want to take a look at our own mission here at the UUCSB that's printed on the front page of our order of service. This is last week's order of service, so yours should look different than this. It is our tradition to welcome guests and visitors to our church. We ask if you will if you're willing to stand up, introduce yourself, and tell us where you're from. So we'll start on this side of the church. Do we have any visitors or guests? No? Okay. How about on the left side of the church?
Yeah.
My left.
Hi, my name is Tina Wexler. I'm a guest of Tina. Tina and Tina are next door neighbors. Very confusing for the postman. So I am living in Black Mountain for the past 2 years. I'm originally from the Chicago suburbs.
Welcome. Any other visitors?
Thank you.
No? Well, we welcome everyone here today. And if you're interested in staying in contact with us, there's a little white postcard shaped card in the pews or in the foyer where you can give us your information and we can stay in contact you with our weekly newsletter and our monthly. Also, want to announce that we are not having coffee hour after service. Hopefully you all read the email. You're welcome to stay after church outside, but we will not be hosting a coffee hour today, and we look forward to being able to do that in the future. Also, if you will, please silence cell phones or any other noisemakers. Thank you. And now let our service begin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. We light our chalice today. The words of Albert Friedlander. We hallow this time together by kindling the lamp of our heritage. Thank you. Our opening words today. Thanks to technology, humankind is now inundated in information. You and I can carry an encyclopedia in our pocket. However, given the magnitude of the environmental, political, and social problems humans have created on a national and global scale, it is apparent that we have not distilled the knowledge required from all this information, much less the wisdom needed from that knowledge. In our fascination with the new, we appear to have abandoned the rich store of ancient Eastern, Western, and indigenous wisdom that sustained cultures and civilizations in the past. Surrounded in the jungle of continuous electronic communication, especially in industrialized nations, individuals now find silence a golden treasure. As Robert McFarlane stated, since before we were anatomically modern, humans have been making journeys into silence to make and find meaning. Unfortunately, as Mahershala Ali declared, social media has colonized what was once a sacred place occupied by emptiness, the space reserved for thought and creativity. We inhabitants of Western North Carolina are so fortunate that from our doorsteps, we can still find our sacred space for the reflection we need in this magnificent natural landscape of mountains and forests. For that, we can repeat each morning what 13th century mystic Meister Eckhart called the only prayer necessary, which is thank you. Our first hymn today, and we will attempt to sing it with masks, is hymn number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
Making sense to sound and sight, source of all to be raised, is our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour, of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, source of all to be raised, is our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the kinship we all share, for all gentle thoughts and mild, source of all to be raised, this our hymn of grateful praise.
For our reading today, we take the words of Walter Royal Jones. Read in unison is number 458 in your hymn. 458. mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge, and community ever exceeding our practice. Reverently, we come together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the Spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love. As a caring congregation, we now ask those of you who would like to share your joys and concerns to let us be aware of these.
My name is Joy Levine. Excuse me?
Yeah.
My concern is not like a real concern, but I'm going out of town 10 days maybe, and I suddenly realized that my front yard has all of these recently planted shrubs and whatnot, and I live pretty close, and I thought maybe a teenager that's not that far away. I don't love the idea of them biking because it's not crazy about Montreat Road. But anyway, if anyone has knows someone who'd be okay to do some watering, maybe a few times each week, and I'd be happy to pay for them. Pay to them. And I'll be thinking of you guys. Well, I think I'm still here next week. Anyway, blessings to everybody.
I'm James Sheeler, and I wanted to share some information with the congregation here. Within the last week, one of my grandson's girlfriend opened a bottle of kombucha, and it exploded on her and ended up badly cutting her, right in here. And so now she's got, a whole bunch of stuff wrapped around there, and she got a tetanus shot and is not able to, it's probably going to be pretty immobile for 6 weeks or something like that. So my grandson's on cooking duty.
Was it commercial kombucha or was it home brewed?
No, it was commercial kombucha. So I don't know how widespread that is, but I thought I'd share that with you.
shared with you that a very good friend of mine, Mel Brodsky, I couldn't get in touch with him. I was afraid maybe he had passed from the planet. So the good news is he has not passed from the planet. My sorrow is that I discovered he's been moved into a nursing facility. He's developed dementia, among other, some physical problems as well. So just thought I'd bring you up to date.
My name is Jim, and I have a great joy to share. Our former foster son, Finley, and his 3.5-year-old brother, Nathaniel, came over to our house to meet our new foster son, Lucas. And we took the boys to the park. But first, Nathaniel is really into gardening, so he had to harvest some vegetables from Grammy's garden that they were able to take home. And when we took the boys to the park, they jumped in the stream, and when they came out, Finley said, "Can I hold the baby?" So I've got great pictures of Finley, Nathaniel, and Lucas all together coming out of the stream. So if you're interested in seeing happiness. But the boys are all doing great, all three.
I'm Scott. Rue and I moved here 29 years ago. And the first people we made friends with were Phil and Dawn. They are not doing well, either one of them. Dawn has taken on an enormous load. And Phil is not doing well, so keep.
Hi, I'm Ray Bockhorst. I have a concern about my wife Anna. She's not feeling well at all. Been ill for almost a week. She's fully vaccinated, but she has all the symptoms. So we took her to get tested yesterday. We'll find out tomorrow. But from what I hear, there's a lot. Even if you're vaccinated, you must be careful. So that's the message.
Wish her luck. Yes.
I'm Andy Reid, and I just want to share a joy and a silliness. I grew up here in Asheville, and I spent 2/3 of a century ignoring this date. But today I turned 68. I passed the 2/3 mark, and I have 33 years to go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Andy. Happy birthday to you.
Hi, I'm Sue. The reason I want to share with you is a concern. All my family live in Thailand, and right now, I have been talking to my sister and brother, and every day now they say almost up to 200 people died from from the Delta variant. So this coming week, they're gonna have a curfew. Everybody have to be at home by 9 o'clock. And everybody, they have been wearing masks for the whole time, but they still catch variant. And there are charges of vaccination. And so the government trying to reproduce the vaccine, but it's only 5.2% people who have full vaccination. My family had to wait for 3 months to get another vaccine. So the second one, they will not get until September. So right now, everybody's so afraid and didn't want to go anywhere. So it's just a caution for us. The fourth wave is stronger and more dangerous. So please keep them in your heart, because they really need to live up their spirit. Because right now they're just so afraid to go anywhere.
Before I let Diane go, I would like to light a candle of joy. Today is the 40th birthday of my oldest son. Who has given me 4 decades of joy. Thank you. Well, thank you. And as Diane has done, we light another candle for those joys and concerns that you keep in your heart. Our meditation and prayer today are the words drawn from Hazrat Inayat Khan. Mystic traditions of all cultures, including Judaism and Christianity, recognize the contemplative and meditative mind, the quiet mind that is not, but rather sitting in receptive reflection, as essential for higher levels of inspiration, understanding, and spiritual realization. Even higher levels of scientific inquiry, as well as artistic inspiration, depend on quiet, intuitive receptivity for breakthroughs. Instead of focusing on the contracted mental energy of thoughts, this receptivity requires expanded openness of the energy of our consciousness. It returns us to the realm of nothing. And now that we are of one mind, may we invite the eloquence of silence. We'll now take up our offertory in the words of Edward Hale. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. As you know, your offerings here will be put to good use. Our next hymn is hymn number 8. Just as long as I have breath, having breath through a mask is going to be an accomplishment. Oh, I'm sorry.
You read it right.
It's misprinted. It's 6.
Oh, 6, I'm sorry. Just as long as I have breath. Sorry.
I must answer yes to mine. Though with pain I make my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I give them, tell them I said yes to mine. Just as long as it should last, I must say yes to truth. In my freedom, in my dark, always happy, loosest heart. If they ask what I give them, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment tears me through, still I get up
We are so fortunate in this congregation to have a number of members whose experience, learning, and perspectives can benefit others. One of these is Tim Perry, who has explored many avenues in his search for meaning and wholeness. His desire for honesty and truth had led him on a journey through various forms of Christianity, including the Presbyterian, Episcopal, and Roman Catholic denominations. Leaving these and wandering in the wilderness, as Tim put it, he ended up here among Unitarians, much to the delight of all who have come to know him. It's a pleasure to have Tim speak to us today. His topic, how to know when you've been had.
Thank you. I feel like, as always, I should express. Get rid of this damn thing. I don't know about you, but I want to do something, if you'll humor me, a little bit liturgical and a little bit sacrilegious.
All right.
We should like it. I want to say, damn the virus 3 times. If you will, I would like you to respond, we're going to get through this. Would you?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Damn the virus! Damn the virus! Damn the virus! Thank you. Oh, I really appreciate that more than you know. When Harry first asked me about pitching in today because they had a cancellation and I suggested this topic, I thought it was going to be fun and easy. I thought it was going to be like that Jeff Foxworthy routine about you may be a redneck. I thought I was going to get up here and say, if you believe conspiracy theories that make Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy sound downright reasonable, you may have been had. If you're still months after the fact disputing the results of the most secure election in the history of this country, you may have been had. If you're blindly trusting in a twice impeached, utterly narcissistic, pathologically lying former president, you may have been had. But it's not really that simple, is it? I mean, it's fun and all, and if you follow me on social media, you know that I have little patience for certain. But the truth is, some conspiracy theories are true. White people really did give Native Americans blankets that were laced with smallpox. That's not fake news. And besides that, I've been really wrong about some stuff. I mean, I spent probably half of my adult life believing a very elaborate theology that now to me seems every bit as ridiculous as Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. And I don't say that to knock anybody's theology. I'm just telling you where I am. I believed it firmly enough to base my life in it, and now it seems ridiculous to me. So either I was wrong then or I'm dead wrong now, one or the other. And if I was wrong then, I didn't know it. And if I'm wrong now, I don't know it. So that calls for a certain amount of humility. I don't like humility. In fact, humility sucks. I mean, how did that ever become such a great virtue anyway? Jesus. Oh. Yeah, that's probably now. us know that about a third of Americans still now firmly believe that the 2020 election was stolen. I found another shocking statistic. In a recent survey of millennials, it was found that only 2/3 of them firmly believed that the earth is round. What that means is that for a third of them, that's still open for discussion. The jury is still out on that. I mean, I knew there was a flat earth movement, but I had no idea that a third of millennials were open to it. Most people believe all of us, we kind of think we understand how our minds work. And we think that what happens is when we're confronted with a new idea, we think about it, we weigh its merits, we hold it up against what we already know to be true of the world and our observations of how the world works. And then we decide whether we believe that new idea or not. That's not really what happens. People who study these things and know far more about it than I do say that what actually happens is we hear a new idea for the first time. We immediately decide whether we believe it or not based on God knows what. And then only later do we give it serious consideration and weigh its merits and hash it out. And only if we have the inclination and the time, or if something prompts us to do it. At least that's true of most of us. That's horrifying. But that's how we are. So then, where does that leave us? I mean, most of us also believe that we kind of think for ourselves. You know, I like to believe that. I don't like to believe I'm just some rube who goes around believing something just because somebody said it. But some of you have probably heard this. There was a psychological experiment in 1951. Solomon Asch at Swarthmore College did an experiment. And the subjects of the experiment were told that the experiment was about perception. And so the people who were leading the experiment, that they would hold up two cards, and on one card there was one line down the middle. And on the other card there were three lines labeled A, B, and C. One of them was the same length as the other one. One of them was longer and one of them was shorter. And they would be asked which one is the same length, or which one is longer, or which one is shorter. And the answer was so obvious that basically everybody got it right every single time, unless they misunderstood the question or something. But then they took the subjects and they put them in groups of 8 people. And they gave their answers out loud. But what the subjects of the experiment didn't know was that the other 7 people in their group were not fellow subjects. They were actors. And they were paid to give the wrong answer some of the time and to do it unanimously. And they were seated in such an order that the last person to give their answer was the actual subject of the experiment. So the actual experiment was not about perception, it was about truth and honesty. And it was about seeing whether the subject of the experiment would give the obvious, truthful answer after hearing 7 other people give an answer that seemed obviously wrong. And they filmed this thing, and you could see on the faces of the subjects that when the other people started giving the wrong answer, they'd look at the cards again, it was obvious that they're thinking, seriously, can they not see that? But then when it would come time for the subjects themselves to answer, somewhere around 50% of the time, they would agree with the wrong answer rather than giving the obvious right answer. And through the course of the experiment, about 75% of the subjects at some point gave a wrong answer in order to agree with the others in the group. And it was obvious that it was a wrong answer. I don't know about you, but that'll keep me up at night. So what about us? What about today? As Harry mentioned earlier, we live in an age of miracles. We can carry in the palm of our hand almost the sum total of human knowledge. And yet, so many of us are still shockingly ignorant. There were people who thought years ago that, the problems with humanity were the result of a lot of people just not having access to education and information. Well, obviously that was wrong. Because we've got it now. It's right there for anybody who's got access to the internet. There's no excuse for not knowing anything. And yet, there's an awful lot of stuff we don't know. Yes, we have the sum total of human knowledge available to us, or virtually that. But the flip side of that is that misinformation and disinformation can travel literally at the speed of light. And it does. And there's so much of it that it can be really hard to tease the truth out. I mean, there's just such an overload of information all claiming to be true. And a lot of really good people have bought into a lot of lies. Or maybe saying good people is a little bit of a stretch in some cases, but a lot of average people certainly have bought into a lot of lies. And the things they have bought into may seem ridiculous to you and me, but you know what? The stuff we believe seems equally ridiculous to them. I mean, that's the truth of it. And here's the shocker. I'm not sure when I realized this, but it was fairly recent. The Nazis in Germany during World War II did not think they were the bad guys. They weren't like cartoon villains rubbing their hands together and laughing gleefully, like, Dr. Evil? Laughing and just enjoying how much evil they were perpetrating in the world. They thought they were doing the right thing. They were helping to bring and keep the master race in its rightful position of world dominance, and everybody would benefit ultimately from that, except for the ones who had to be exterminated. Details, But they didn't know they were the bad guys. They should have. It's ridiculous that they didn't, but they didn't. So how can we know when we've been had? Maybe we can't. At least not know for sure. So we're reduced, and I was reduced in preparing this sermon, to try to come up with a short list of possible red flags that we might look for in ourselves and that we might share with others, because I suspect most of us have a friend or two who's on the other side of some of these issues and who believes some things that are just inconceivable to us, and who, we can't understand how they even think that way. So I wanted to try and bring something out today that might be helpful when we talk to them. And that might be helpful in examining ourselves. I know my tendency is just honestly to call people idiots and dismiss them. But that's not really the most effective way to change people's minds. Shocking. I mean, you would think that would work. It really doesn't. They just double down and stop listening. And there's where that unfortunate humility becomes necessary again. Because if we're going to be a part of that group of 7 people that they're going to listen to a different answer and change their mind, we have to become a part of that 7 people they like and trust. We have to be in. We have to be part of their us. And if we spend years calling them idiots, that's going to be really hard to accomplish. Mea culpa. So, one possible red flag. Is there any part of your beliefs that you're not willing to question? Now, granted, there may be some part of your beliefs that you've really spent some time on and you've really hashed it through, and you're just not willing to keep hashing it through forever. Granted, that's a possibility. And we certainly don't have to, keep going back and learning the alphabet all over again. But for most of us, I suspect that there are some parts of our belief system that we never really have question. And maybe we're a little uncomfortable questioning it. I'm told that if you hook our brains up to an EEG or some other device that can register brain activity, when someone's ideas and beliefs are questioned, the response in the brain is almost identical to the response of being physically threatened. Isn't that interesting? And if we're not aware of that, we may respond outwardly in a way that is very similar to how we would respond if we were physically threatened. I remember when I was still a very traditional Christian and when I was still an acting priest, one of the fellows in the congregation asked me if I'd be willing to meet with him occasionally and just talk through, some questions that he had. He was kind of a former hippie, and the traditional Christianity rested a little uneasily on his mind sometimes. He questioned more things than they recommended that he question. And so he and I started meeting, and I would listen to his questions, and I would be as accommodating as I could. But I wasn't really asking those questions at the time. Eventually I did, and here I am. But at the time, I wasn't asking those questions and had never been kind of confronted with how real those questions were. Another possible red flag. Are you always, and always is the key word, careful about the distinction between assumptions and known facts? I mean, that's a tricky one. Because when we make assumptions, they seem like known facts. I mean, that's why we're assuming them, because we believe they're facts, right? I had someone tell me one time that he knew for a fact, and pardon me if I get a little bit partisan political here, but he knew for a fact that Hillary Clinton lied more than Donald Trump did. He was absolutely certain of this. So I showed him one of the articles from one of the prominent newspapers where they kept a running tally of the verifiable lies that Donald Trump had told since he was president. And it was at the time, something over 6,000. This was early on. And so then he proceeded to tell me of two things that Hillary Clinton had lied about. I said, okay, that's two. You got a few thousand more to go. Didn't change his mind. He was still sure that she lied more. He couldn't prove it, he couldn't count it, he couldn't produce a list from a conservative newspaper. But he was firmly convinced of it. So are we really careful about what we're assuming and what we have reason to believe we know? Honestly, I'm not always careful. Another one is, are we always careful about the difference between proof and possible or apparent evidence? Now, this is one you hear a lot. Somebody will say, well, see, that proves it. It usually doesn't. Proof is hard. Showing evidence is fairly easy, and showing possible evidence is even easier. But actual proof, that doesn't happen very often. And so we have to be careful about that. Are we proving something, or are we just suggesting that it might be true? There's a difference. And we need to be aware of that. And we need to be able to ask other people, are you sure about that? Does that really prove what you're saying it proves? Or does it maybe just suggest it? And I think that's a question that we can ask gently enough of someone we know to maybe get an honest answer. Here's another one. Who do you trust? Who do you distrust, and why? If you don't just turn on any news media and listen to what they say, the way we all used to listen to Walter Cronkite and believe every word that came out of his mouth. If you don't do that anymore, if you lean towards certain media outlets and shy away from others, well, why? What's the criteria that you use to discern between them? Because honestly, I suspect most of the time, we just lean toward the ones we agree with. Because it's easier to listen to the one that doesn't hack you off. There are certain news media that I can only listen for about 5 minutes before I want to throw something at the TV. And so it's just easier to listen to the ones we agree with. But isn't that kind of lazy, if you're honest? And I think, again, this is me too. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody else. This is what we do. We can't all be experts at everything. So we all have to trust somebody who knows more than we know, or who we at least believe knows more than we do about some things. So how do we decide? When one person says one thing and they're totally convinced, and somebody else says another thing and they're totally convinced, but the two are pretty nearly opposites? I mean, how do you wade through that? It's exhausting to have to keep wading through that stuff endlessly. So we take a shortcut. You know, we say, well, I usually agree with these guys. I'll watch them. And of course, experts can be wrong. They can be. They have been in the past. But, I mean, let's be honest. If we're rejecting the consensus of the leading experts in a particular field and listening to somebody else, that might be a red flag. For example, if we're talking about a virus, and if you're ignoring the leading virologists and immunologists worldwide, who are virtually unanimous in what they're saying, and you're choosing instead to believe a radiologist, or a dentist, or a politician, or some guy who makes really great pillows. I mean, come on, let's be honest. The experts could be wrong. And the politician or the pillow guy could be right. But seriously, what are the odds that all of the experts virtually would be almost in unanimous agreement and they'd all be dead wrong or lying? They've all been bought off by some vast conspiracy. What are the odds? Seriously. But as I said, it doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong if you're siding with the underdog. I mean, we all do it sometimes. We love the underdog, right? It's great when everybody thinks you're wrong and then you're proven right, and it's wonderful. So it doesn't mean you're wrong, but it does mean the burden of proof is on your side. And if you expect somebody else to reject the experts and listen to the politician or the pillow guy, you know, you got some work to do before you should really expect them to be convinced. I mean, it's kind of like if you took your car to the mechanic and you had it there half a dozen times and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it, what was wrong with it. And then your 8-year-old daughter says, it sounds like a bad vacuum line. She might be right. It could be a bad vacuum line. But seriously, what are the odds? I mean, unless you've got a very unusual 8-year-old daughter who knows a lot about cars. And so we have to be realistic when we look at these things. And I think we can gently ask people we know to be realistic with us. And talk about, what are the odds? Doesn't it seem odd to you that all these people are either wrong or lying, and this little handful of people over here have figured it out? Probably not. Here's a good one. How do your beliefs affect you? There's a great little documentary called The Brainwashing of My Dad. Have you seen it? It used to be on Netflix. I don't think it is anymore, but I'm pretty sure you can find it somewhere online and watch it. You might have to pay $1 or $2, but it's worth it. This documentarian talks about how her father had always been just the most likable, salt of the earth guy, got along with everybody, you know, he would have the barbecue, invite the whole neighborhood over, and everybody would come. And he was just a gregarious, wonderful man. Well, after he retired, he set up a little workshop in his garage, and he, you know, he would turn the radio on while he was in his workshop. And he began to listen to a certain obese, philandering political commentator whose name I will not honor by mentioning in this place. And he began to become a fan of this person. And his views began to change. But not only that, his behavior began to change. This man who nobody had ever heard say a racist or sexist or misogynistic or bigoted thing suddenly didn't much like Muslims and black people and a whole lot of women. He changed, and he became very argumentative, very hard to get along with. He would brook no contradiction of his ideas. It got to the point that his own adult children pretty much didn't want to be around him anymore. They couldn't come to his house and have dinner without getting into an argument. Well, eventually, a couple of things happened that changed things. His radio broke. So he stopped listening to that certain obese philanderer commentator. And he had signed up for all these email news lists. And his wife, and he was in the hospital for a little while. So while he was in the hospital, his wife and his daughter went through these emails. They unsubscribed him from some of those lists, and they subscribed him to a couple of lists he wasn't on before. So they broadened his perspective a little bit, got him to start getting a feed that was a little bit different from what he had gotten before. And some months later, he and his wife were watching the news, and they played a clip of a certain African American president of the United States. And he said, I kind of like him. And his wife picked her dentures up off the floor, put them back in her mouth, and said, yeah, he seems like a good guy. And so, you know, we have to ask too, what are we feeding ourselves with, and how is it affecting us? Are our beliefs making us better people? Are they making us more compassionate? Are they making us more generous, more loving? Are they making us mean-spirited, more exclusive, and judgmental, and less likable? Careful if that's what's going on. We need to wrap this up, don't we? I'll throw in one last one. Are your beliefs contradictory? Most of us hold some contradictory beliefs. We believe one thing and we'll say that in one circumstance, and then in another circumstance we believe a different thing, and we'll say that, and we believe them equally firmly, but when we put them together, they don't fit. For example, I got into a discussion online with an old friend of mine who is a very conservative evangelical, fundamentalist, really Christian. Because I had posted something on social media about children being taken from their parents and put in cages at the southern border. And she commented and said, "How does this help the dialogue?" To have a dialogue with someone who's trying to judge behavior. She was a Christian. She was somebody who claimed to follow Jesus. According to the Gospels, children loved Jesus. They were drawn to him. You know how kids sometimes can just see right through the bullshit and tell what you're about? They were drawn to Jesus. When the adults came along and they wanted to shoo the kids away because they had important stuff to talk about. And Jesus said, "No, don't do that. Let the children come. Don't forbid them." And he said, "Because this is what the kingdom of heaven is like." That's the Jesus my friend claimed to follow. And yet she wanted to have a dialogue about how it might be okay to take children away from their parents and put them in cages at the southern border. Now that's a little extreme example, but we all do that to some extent. So it's important to ask ourselves and sometimes to ask other people, well, how do you square this belief with that one? How does that work? Would Jesus put kids in cages? Would he say for us to? Do you think? You know. I wanted to do a little talk back, but I talked too much. So I'll tell you what I wanted to do though, and I would love to hear from you. If there have been situations in which you have either someone has changed your mind about something that you really held dear, or you've changed someone else's mind, I'd kind of like to hear about it. But I'd encourage you too to spend some time thinking about it. I'll give you an example to get you started. I posted a thing on social media, and I said, imagine for a minute that somebody you know needs a bone marrow transplant or a kidney transplant. Something that's going to require a pretty serious sacrifice from somebody else. They're going to have to, put their own well-being on the line in order, and if they don't, this person's going to die. And imagine for a minute that you are the only tissue match that has been found. So if you don't subject yourself to this invasion, not only of your life and your convenience, but of your very physical being, if you don't submit to that, this person's going to die. And if you do submit to it, this person has a pretty good chance of being able to live out a normal lifespan. Should there be a law that would compel you to do it? And I said, I think most of us would agree that it would be okay for that person to ask you to make that sacrifice. It would even be understandable for them to beg you to do it or to offer to pay you or something. But I think most of us would stop short of saying there should be a law that would compel you to do it. And yet, many of us would like to see laws on the books that would compel a woman to carry to term and deliver a child, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of what it might do to her relationship with her family, regardless of what it might do to her career, regardless of what it might do even to her physical well-being, someone said. And that's all I said. That was the end of my little social media post. An old friend of mine who seems to have gotten more vocally religious since I knew him better, commented. And he said, you make me think deep thoughts. But when it comes right down to it, I support a woman trying to choose. And it sounded to me like that was a conclusion he had just come to. And I was so amazed and so honored because I didn't know people still did that. I didn't know anybody still changed their mind like that. So I want to close by just encouraging us all to look for those opportunities to speak the truth in a gentle, kind, loving way instead of the sarcastic way I like to do it. And may truth prevail, because we need a lot more truth. Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned in introducing Tim, that we have a number of members whose experience, learning, and perspectives benefit the rest of it. And Tim embodies all that. And thank you for such a thought-provoking presentation, Tim. Our closing hymn is number 159. This is my song.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar.
Our closing words come from Bill Waltz. Here we are, the earth beneath us, the heavens above and all around. We walk this world between and sharing with all creatures, never separate from this sacred source. Know this, feel this, and wisdom and compassion awaken, and we become whole. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Are you in charge of this? I am. Yep, it's still, there's like a delay, so it's still like I'm in there too behind.